hope as well. Once again, my name is Jesus Padilla. I'm part of the Florida SBDC at FIU and the Pino Global Entrepreneurship Center. And we're thanking you to be here present in today's webinar. Before I introduce you towards Ricardo Weiss, it's a great opportunity that this is a great event that we're having with the Pino Global Entrepreneurship Center, the Miami Herald Startup Pitch Competition. It will definitely lay the groundwork and the foundation from today's webinar. Just a few housekeeping items. There is going to be a poll that will be appearing on your screen. By all means, this will definitely enhance us to provide the additional webinars and similar webinars to enhance your entrepreneur ventures. In addition, the Miami Herald Startup Pitch Competition started on January 25th, and it will be all the way down towards March 2nd. The Startup Pitch Competition has 3 tracks. We have the community track, the high school track, and the FIU track. For the FIU track, it is open for all FIU students, alumni, and faculty. It is open for all colleges, so it could be College of Business, it could be the School of Hospitality Tourism Management, College of Education. It has to be a for-profit business, and the business has to be established in operation for 3 years or less. So any business that has been operational as of January 1st, 2018. For the community track, it will be a pitch deck along with the FIU track as well, a pitch deck containing 12 to 20 slides, and it will be answering some common questions as such: the exit strategy, what is the management team, what are the break-even analysis, the financial projections, and also what is the problem you're trying to solve. For the community track, it will be for all South Florida, from Monroe County, Broward County, Miami-Dade County, and Palm Beach. And in multiple entries, it's available for one person as long as they are different business ideas. And for more information, you can visit that at the Miami Herald website, which is miamiherald.com/challenge. Now, you may have some high school students. There is an exciting track for them that they could participate. We would strongly encourage the student to contact their network for teaching entrepreneurship program in their respective schools for additional information as to how to submit, what are some of the items that is needed for them to participate as well. So once again, some of the key takeaways is that March 2nd is the deadline to submit all your pitch decks. Along with additional information, you could visit the miamiherald.com/challenge website for some additional information and resources. But also the FIU College of Business has some exciting information that will enhance the FIU community, and also the how to enhance it. You get to know some of the judges, how who are participating, some resources that can enhance your pitch deck along with today's webinar. It is on the website. It's FIU. It's business.fiu.edu/startup pitch. And now it is a great honor to introduce you to Mr. Ricardo Weiss. He is one of our business consultants in the SBDC. And without further ado, I'd like for you to introduce you to Ricardo Weiss.
Hello, everyone. Can you guys hear me? Yeah. So let me share my screen. So I'm here to talk to you about how to understand a little bit better what investors are looking for when they're looking at a deck. And by the way, the format of the deck will be the same as you would use for the Miami Herald competition. So it's a good process to understand how to build this startup pitch. So I'm originally from Venezuela. I've been here for about 26 years. I live in Miami. I have grown children who one lives in Miami and the other one lives in Utah. And I have a passion for scuba diving and take any opportunity that I can to do that. And we're privileged to live in this area because after the famous reef in Australia, the second largest reef is just off the coast of Florida. So I've been around for a long time. I've done tons of different things, and I've been involved with startups for now over 20 years. I've been both operating startups as well as funding startups. So I have a good sense of what it is to be in your shoes when you're trying to raise funding, and the type of decks that make it to the eyes of investors. And I also know what it is to see things through the investment side. You know, what are the things that the investors look for, and what drives the decision to make an investment. So during my presentation, I'm going to be using the word investor a lot. And I just want to make sure that we understand that I'm using the term as it refers to someone that invests professionally or semi-professionally, and that it's accredited according to the SEC rules. And a lot of people think of investors as just people that have large checkbooks, and that may be so. They may be investors as well. But my investor is the one that is a disciplined investor. So the first question that you need to ask yourself is, can your interests be aligned with those of the investors? So investors, when they invest, are looking for companies that can grow very quickly and exit quickly. So there are typically two types of ventures that get organized or start. One is the one that I'm describing, which is a company that really is focused on growth. And there's also the type of company where you're building a legacy and you're really looking for sustainable profits year in, year out that can sustain your lifestyle. When an investor invests, they're not interested in becoming a partner in the sense that they're satisfied with just taking a dividend on a yearly basis or sharing profits. They're really looking for an opportunity to exit or sell the company within a framework of 5 to 7 years, where they can get a return on their investment, not only for themselves, but also for the partners that have invested in their fund. So when you're looking to bring investors, and again, using the term as I defined it before, these are professional, semi-professional investors that are disciplined, that do multiple investments through the years. They're looking only to become aligned with you if you have the same thought of thinking of selling the company within a period of time when you both share on the windfall. There are different type of investors that invest in startups. You have the typical angel investors or venture capital firms, but you also have family and friends that may be investing at the beginning with you. And you also have, particularly in South Florida, we're rich on this, family offices. Family offices are offices for wealthy individuals that invest in family fortunes in different ventures, and they look, and some of them like investing in early stage companies. You also have some companies, some large corporations have developed venture arms that are investing in early stage companies, especially if these early stage companies are developing concepts that are aligned with their strategic direction. And when you grow larger and bigger, private equity becomes an alternative as well. I should have said this at the beginning. I'm sure you guys are going to have a lot of questions. I think the best way is for you to put the questions into the Q&A button in your computer. And Brianna, at the end of the session, will read the questions so I can answer them for you. Before you go out and knock on an investor or investor's door, you need to understand and do a little bit of research and understand that investor. And, you know, the fact that one of the things that people sometimes don't understand is that just the same as you're trying to raise funds, investors raise funds from other investors and that trust them to make that investment idea. And they have to prepare a document which they report to those investors that establishes their investment criteria and their investment thesis. So knowing that each investor is, again, professional investor has an investment criteria is important, and most of them publish those in their website. So do a little bit of research before you send plans to investors. Because, for example, if an investor doesn't invest in social media, it doesn't matter how great your social media idea or concept is, they're just not going to make that exception because it jeopardizes their commitment to their own investors. Also, look at what their historical investments have been. Typically, funds have a limited time span. And if they have not made an investment in the past couple of years, they're probably not going to make an investment now unless they announce that they're making new investments. So the way it works is that you submit your plan to an investor group, and that investor group screens the plan against their criteria, and they score every plan. And only the ones that pass screening make it to the investment committee. Typically, a group may see anywhere from 30 to 100 plans per month. So not every plan makes it across, and it's not necessarily a reflection of the idea. It's more a reflection of the interests that that investor group may have. They may only, from those 60 to 100 the plans that they see on a monthly basis, may decide to meet maybe with 5, and maybe only 2 or 3 make it through their investment process. And typically they might make 2 or 3 or 4 investments per year. As I said before, typically an investor, professional investor, is going to look for making an equity investment. They're not going to make a loan. So the funding starts basically with either a convertible debt or SAFE document, which is a simple agreement for future equity, which is nowadays the norm. And it's a hybrid between an outright stock purchase and a convertible debt document that really pushes the evaluation down the road. But at the end of the day, both of these documents eventually convert into actual stock. Raising funds for an entrepreneur it's really an ongoing process. It really never stops, because you have to fuel the growth of your company through funding. And typically a company that is in hyper growth will not be generating the necessary cash flow that it needs to sustain that growth. So they have to raise funds on a continuing basis. So, and it's a process that never stops until you really reach a stage of stabilization. Just to give you an idea of the market, there's about 500,000 companies that get started on a yearly basis, according to the SBA. Only about 30,000 receive some type of funding. And here the term angels is defined broadly. It's not angel organizations, but it could be family and friends. And only about 1,200 get actually funded by VC venture capital groups. And only, in a given year, only from 100 to 140 make it to an IPO, which is a initial public offer. So the chances of starting a company and getting some sort of funding, if you do the math, it's a bit less than 6%. Companies go through different stages, and early stage companies go through these stages as well. So just to have an understanding how that works is that you start with your concept. Many of you probably are at the concept stage. You're developing the business plan for the first time. You have a great idea. You want to get it out to the market. So you're basically in the concept stage. The next step in the concept stage is really making it to an incubator or an accelerator program, and or getting some family and friends to fund that initial development of a minimum viable product and finish developing a strong business plan. If you make it through that stage, the next stage is really testing the market to see if your idea has an audience, a paying customer, and that's a proof of concept stage, or it's called pre-seed as well. And typically, it gets funded by angel groups and some pre-seed funds. This is also the death valley, because a lot of companies fail at this stage if they cannot get that funding. But let's say your proof of concept is successful, you're able to show strong numbers in this milestone. The next stage is really to get another round of funding from angel funds, which allow you to further test the concept and prove again that there's a market in a larger area. And if you're successful at that stage, you go into what's called a Series A, which is when the venture capital companies come in, and at that stage you already have a significant cash flow, and you are near cash flow positive. There's tons of alternatives in the capital market. Just to give you an idea, there's about 2,700 VC funds. There's about 3,000 family offices, and there's about 450 organized angel groups. In South Florida, there's 3 or 4 that operate in this area are well known. So, like I said before, every investor group has an investment criteria, and typically that criteria is built about who the management team is, how scalable the idea is, and what's your sustainable differentiation, but also what is your industry vertical and what's your geography. And a lot of investors, especially at the very, very early stage of the company, prefer to invest in companies that are geography close to them, geographically close to them. And and there's a myth that well, I don't know whether it's true or not, but that many investors will not invest in a company that they cannot get to and be back within the same day. So typically, there are some areas that are preferred by investors, and some areas that investors, and I'm talking about again the professional investors, will not be interested in. And this is just a list, so it gives you an idea. And when I put here, for example, restaurants or retail, I know that there's specialized groups that do like investing in restaurants or in retail, but it's not your common investor. The common investor likes to invest in software companies that don't require large capital expenditures that need to be amortized over a period of time. And so they like software, they like internet, and so forth. They don't like inventory either. So what are the required documents? What documents do you need to put together in order to be able to pitch investors? So the first, and I put them in a specific order, and I'll try to explain why. You need to have detailed financials. And the reason I put it here first is because if your financials don't work for you, then don't waste the time. Because if the numbers do not talk to you and do not talk to the investor, they're just not going to be interested. So there has to be some sensible thought into the financials. Then the next step is if you go through the financials and, hey, you know, this is my idea has great potential, and we can put it to market in a financially viable way, then the next step is really to put all that information and tell your story in an investor deck. And there's two, and I differentiate investor deck from pitch deck, and I'll explain that a little bit further. Those two can be combined into one single document, and especially when you're in the very early stage of the company, it's typically you just work on one of those two. But they, you know, as the company grows and has more information, historical information, you may want to think of dividing this to the two decks. And the last document is the one-page summary, which is utilized to really do that initial approach to investors to see if they will be interested in talking to you. It's really about, you know, opening the door for you. Just because it's a one-page summary, a lot of people work on the executive summary first. The problem is that that executive summary has to be excellent, and it has to be really derived from a lot of thought, and that thought comes from working on the decks first. So I would strongly encourage you to leave that as a last, not start here. So what's the difference between an investor deck and a business plan? The business plan is a traditional business plan that we've always been used to. That is, you know, it's a book of 50 to 60 pages, and still utilized in some industries, like in the banking industry. If you're going to look for a loan, they might ask you for the traditional business plan. You know, only their analysts have the time to go through that. A typical, you know, for an investor group, if you send a business plan, you have the risk that it's just going to get thrown into the virtual garbage can. I know I did. I mean, when I was in that role and I was looking at, you know, I would sit down and have to review 30 plans. If it was a 50, 60 page, I just didn't have patience for it. So I wouldn't recommend you going that route. The investor deck is typically 20 to 25 slides. It's self-explanatory, and it's designed, you know, a lot of people think that an investor would make that decision based on that document, but it's not. It's only a document designed to open the door and have that conversation. So, and it's mostly forward-looking. So what's the difference between an investor deck and a pitch deck? Well, the pitch deck is designed for you to walk and speak through it, and not to be a standalone. So it's something that you would use in a presentation rather than something that you would send out to an investor. So if you have both, then the way it would work is you get a meeting with an investor, you present the pitch deck on your, you know, on your web share application. You walk him through it, you explain through it, and he'll say, can you send me your deck, please? Then I would say the investor sent deck, which is a more complete deck. The pitch deck is just a very summarized version of the investor deck. So what is it that you're trying to address when you're running one of these pitch decks? You have to address and really convince that investor that you're not going to lose him money, that you actually have a potential of making him money. And he wants to have a sense of how big the market is and whether that business model that you're proposing will eventually make sense for this idea. But more than anything else, that investor wants to understand if the team that you put together can actually execute against that plan, and whether that team is coachable and is willing to work together with the investor. So getting funded it takes a little bit of patience and time. Typically it might take you anywhere up to 9 or 12 months to get funded the first time. It may take you endless number of pitch presentations before you get funded. And, and you have to be ready to dedicate the time. And, you can't get frustrated if you don't get funded the first time you present. And you can't get frustrated if the money doesn't come within the week. It just doesn't happen that way. So the core part of the presentation is the structure of a pitch deck. So I'm just going to go on how to build one. So basically, a typical pitch deck has 12 to 15 sections. And not all are necessary, but some of them are critical. And I try to highlight the ones here that are critical. And I'll go into more detail on each of this. And this presentation will be made available to you after the meeting, after this presentation. And so that you don't have to take notes if you don't want to. You can also add, in addition to the core part of the deck, some potential added information. And I'm just describing some of the ones that you may choose to provide. The typical appendix is providing more information on the product or having some more of an insight into what the pipeline of potential customers may be. So the first slide is the cover slide. It's basically the front slide that has the logo and name of your company, and what the purpose of the presentation is, and typically investor presentation, and the date, and it can be just a month, but I strongly also encourage you to put a version number, because one of the things that happens is that you change the presentation as you get more and more feedback, and you want to be able to track what version you provided to each person that you meet with. So if they come back and ask you a question 2 or 3 weeks after, you know what they're talking about, because the presentation might have changed significantly in between. So I always save my presentations with a version number. And I've been with companies that will have 80 or 90 different versions at one given point in time. The other things that you may want to add in the cover slide is some representation of the traction that you may have and the name of who the presenter is or the CEO of the company. One of the things that it's important to remember is that decisions especially with groups that see many presentations on a given time, is that you need to grab their attention and interest within the first 30 seconds of the deck. The way that happens is that you assume that because you sent in your presentation or your deck via email, that they're just so excited that they're going to open up that email and see that presentation, but it doesn't happen that way. Unfortunately, it gets passed on to typically an analyst that accumulates those presentations and may sit down once a month or once a week or every 2 weeks and sees anywhere from 15 to 30 presentations in in a couple hours. So they rush through the presentations, and unless you grab their attention, and within the first couple of slides, they're just going to say, "I'm not interested," and just move on to the next one. So the way you grab that attention is in the executive summary slide, and it has to be really very strong. And this is the slide that I think that makes or breaks a deck. So it's really important that you take the time and effort to be very concise, very descriptive, and very interesting in the way that you present your product or idea. The next slide deals with what is the problem that you're trying to resolve. It has to be an aha moment. This is a slide where the person that is listening to you or viewing your deck says, I get it. And you need to focus on resolving your potential client's #1 problem, not the number 10 problem. There has to be a significant pain point for these potential clients in order to be an interesting proposal. And also, this is an opportunity to address any inefficiencies that there might be in the marketplace. This slide, the next slide is a slide where you define how big the opportunity is. And so a lot of investors are very knowledgeable of the industries that they invest in. So it's not about talking about the overall market. It's really talking about specifically the addressable market that you can reach. The market that you can touch, and I'll try to explain it in the next slide. So if you have, and I also know if you see my cursor, but if this is a total market, your addressable market is really the market that you can reach. The best way to explain it is that let's assume for a moment that you're trying to create a bakery, and the total market for baked products might be $300 trillion. However, if your bakery is going to be located in Brickell, you know that people are only going to go and buy a product from your bakery if they're at walking distance from your bakery, and so your addressable market is that it's the people that live within walking distance of your bakery. So try to convert that thought into what your real addressable market is. So the next slide is about what is the product or service that you're trying to provide that will be a solution to that pain point that you have identified. So I strongly encourage you to use a product depiction or screenshots if you have them, but not a demo if you're pitching to more than just a group that is sitting around the table. I put this slide here, and it's about the team, but for many groups that have very strong teams, I tend to suggest that they move the team slide to be the next one after the executive summary, because I know that when I was in the decision-making process of where to invest and what to invest, to me, having a strong team was more important than having a great idea. And I think that a lot of investors think that way, because it's not about how great the idea is, it's about who and how are they going to be executing that idea. You know, at the end of the day, I'm writing a check to that team, and I have to be able to trust that they can execute that idea. So a lot of, you know, when I sit in the Miami Herald competition, especially, a lot of decks come to me without a team slide, and you don't, you know, that's going to count strongly against you, because I want to see and understand what is the value that each team member brings to the table. So it's not enough just to put a picture and say, well, you know, he studied engineering. You know, does he have any relevant experience? And if it's only educational that he has, what specialization within education, you know, makes him a good candidate for that position? It's not necessary to put every member of the team just focus on the key members. But I cannot stress enough that you need to have, especially if you wish to get funded, you have to have a very strong team that has industry expertise. That industry expertise helps me validate the strength of the plan. In terms of board and advisors, you only have directors when it's appropriate to have directors. And that's probably only when you get to the Series A. Before that, you focus on the advisors. But it's not good enough to just have a face and a name of advisor. You know, I need to understand how, you know, what's their commitment to help you with this project. And do they have skin in the game? Are they investing in your venture or just lending their name? And I'll share an anecdote that happened to me once. I was making an investment decision for a group in terms of a startup that I was looking at. And it was a fairly robust startup and had been funded already by Intel. And, you know, we looked at their board of advisors, and I just happened to know one of those advisors, and I called him up to see what he thought about the company. And it turned out that he knew the guy, but he had not authorized the company to use his name. So you have to be careful about that to make sure that whoever you put in your board of advisors is committed to supporting the company. The next slide is about traction. It's really understanding what your key milestones have been and whether you have any hard traction yet. And if you do, then you need to show it, you know, and put logos, show who those brand clients are. And if you have a growing pipeline, then show that growing pipeline. That's really an important slide for the investor. The next slide is about the competition, you know, and I also get a number or I used to get a number of clients that I looked at that would say, we have no competition, we're so unique. But basically, if you don't have any competition, there's no market for your product. So it's not about having, you know, a product that is so unique that there's no market for it. It's about really having a great solution for painting the market in a market that has potential. So there's different ways of showing competition, and let me share with you a couple of ways. One is an axis chart, and here you're choosing two features or two attributes of your company versus the competition, and this is how you would, you know, demonstrate that you're better in all manners that your competition, because you always want to be in this quadrant. So I used to hear an example of Apple, who's got a good perception of quality, but it's also an expensive product, and they're more expensive there than any other competitor. But they've been able to demonstrate that people are willing to pay a premium for Apple products. So this is the axis chart. The next one is the matrix chart, and I personally like this the best. And here you would choose a number of attributes where you would compare yourself to your competitors, and you would show how your company is better in each of those attributes as compared to any of your competitors. And there's also the SWOT chart that a lot of people like using, which it shows your strengths and weaknesses against your competition. So what are your competitive advantages? That's your, in the next slide, it gives you an opportunity, to talk about how you compare with your competition and why you're a better solution. And also provides you an opportunity, if you have patents or intellectual property that defends your position, here's where you would showcase that. And you would also describe any barriers to entry that the market has. The next slide is about the business model. And here in the business model, you talk about what your key revenue streams are going to be, what's your pricing, whether it's going to be subscription or you're going to be selling by the piece, or if you're going to have a freemium model, this is the opportunity to describe how you're going to generate revenue. And also here, it's your opportunity to talk about the long-term value, the lifetime value of a customer, and what your customer acquisition cost would be. Again, this is one of the areas where a lot of entrepreneurs and founders don't spend too much time developing, which is their go-to-market strategy. And so as a founder, we're always enamored with our product and idea, but we don't spend the time to really figure out how we're going to get that product or idea to the market. As an investor, for me, a very strong go-to-market strategy is very important in my decision process, because I really need to understand not only the idea, but how you're going to get that idea to the market. So, I strongly encourage you to spend time in trying to think this thing through. By the way, a lot of the people that send in plans to the Miami Herald business competition also either do not include a go-to-market strategy or just don't take the time. So, but it's an important slide, and it counts for a lot of points in the decision process. So basically, what does the go-to-market mean? It means how you're going to get that product idea to the market. It means, the distribution channels that you're going to be using. How you're going to convert and acquire those customers. Do you have any strategic partnerships that is going to help you get that product to market? What is the sales cycle? Do you have a product that is a B2B solution, and getting in the decision-making process in that industry can take sometimes 18 months? Have you identified that? And what's your cost to acquire a customer? Have you defined that? So those are things that need to be addressed. Sorry, let me go back one slide. You have to include financial projections. And a lot of people think, especially when they're starting, how do I know how much I'm going to be selling? It's a tough question. It's sometimes a guesstimate based on what the industry looks like, but it's also an opportunity for me as an investor to really understand your understanding of your financial ability to demonstrate knowledge and experience. It's about understanding how what your expenses are going to be and what control of your expenses you expect to have. I mentioned before that you need to have, your financial projections in a separate spreadsheet form. But here in the deck, you would use just a summarized version of that and with the top line numbers. So what am I looking for? Basically, I'm looking for a 3 to 5 year projection. If you have historical data, you never start with year one, because you probably have accumulated a number of expenses. So that's year 0. And so it's really top line where you're looking at your gross revenue that is expected based on the target market and number of users. Your cost of goods sold, how much is it going to cost you to manufacture the product? If you're a software company, you really don't have much of an expense here, other than commissions or revenue share that you may have, and that gives you the net revenue. Then you have the general and administrative costs, which is rent and telephone and office expenses. You have your salaries and benefits. I always urge you to break that line out, because as an investor, I want to understand what impact salaries and benefits have overall. And then marketing and sales, which is how much you're going to be spending in marketing the product on a given year. And that gives you a net operating income. My expectation as an investor is that you're going to have a negative cash flow or a negative net operating income for at least 3 or 4 or even 5 years. So I don't expect you to be making money, because if you're making money from year 1, there's no justification for you to be raising funds. So once you've been able to share those financials with us, the next slide is about how much money you need to raise and how are you going to be using that money. And you can do it very simply, with a pie chart. And I really want to understand what your monthly burn rate is, which is really, your monthly negative cash flow. And if you had any other prior investors. The next slide is about an exit strategy. And it's an optional slide. A lot of people don't add it to their decks. It's not mandatory. It's your decision whether you add it or not. But the reason I like to see it on a deck is because it shows me that you're forward thinking, that your thinking is aligned with mine, that you're thinking, okay, how am I gonna, grow this baby and be able to exit? And the other reason I like it is because it gives me a good understanding of your understanding of what the potential exits may be. So, for example, if you put an IPO as as a possible exit strategy, I know you're not a candidate for me. Just because, as I share with you, the chances of you doing an IPO are so minimal that I'd rather put that money into buying lotto tickets, because I have a greater chance of winning than funding your company. On the other hand, if you show me that your potential acquirer is interested in your traction, then I know that you don't need a lot of money for software development, and you're probably aggregating software rather than developing a unique software, which is a good equation for me. The unique technology that I included as a possible exit strategy really rarely occurs in the software sector. Unique technology is more when you're talking about medical devices or very sophisticated hardware. Traction tends to be the most common exit for a lot of the companies. And tracking means having a book of clients that is of interest to the acquirer. Revenue cash flow is a more traditional exit, and an acqui-hire is when you're being bought out just because you have a strong technical team that may be of interest to the buyer. And the closing slide, which is again optional, but I also strongly encourage you to have it, is what is, it's not a summary slide, and it's not about summarizing the points of what I saw before, because if I was paying attention, I don't need a summary slide. It's really what you want me to remember about your company. What is it that you want me to walk away with? And it's the opportunity to share with me what the bigger picture is. What is your vision of the potential of your company? And sometimes if you, and it's a blue sky type of thinking, and if you see future opportunities with your technology or service, you also have a chance to present those here. So just to give you a final guidelines, it's, although there's nowhere written how many slides a deck has to have, it's probably better if you keep it within 15 to 30. You keep the slides very clean, just bullet points and simple. It should be self-explanatory. But if I have any questions, I know that I can reach out to you. Make sure that you don't have any typos or math errors. I cannot tell you, how often that happens. I strongly urge you to be creative with the look and feel, but not with the content. When you're pitching, and I'm talking about pitching on a personal basis, either through a web presentation or through a meeting that you get with an investor, try to grab the audience within the first minute. The deck is about telling a story. So tell your own story, how you got there and why you're doing this. And, if they give you 10 minutes, stay within the allotted time, because I cannot tell you how embarrassing it is when, the 10 minutes are up and you're only midway through your presentation and they say thank you and ask you to leave. So don't read slides. You should know the material. It's about choosing one message for every slide and just focus on the more important message. And don't use industry acronyms. Don't expect people to know every industry. So, if you're using it, explain it and define it. And don't show videos. A lot of people try to do this, but you're risking equipment malfunction, or taking too long to start the presentation as you set up, and that's very distracting. And the typical reaction is negative rather than positive. Couple words of wisdom: be better at one thing than doing 10 things that you can't do significantly better. Be ready for rejection. It's going to take a lot of time and effort before you get that funding. And avoid assumptions that are not well funded in in the information that you provide. Couple myths, you know, and I've seen it many times, and that's why I bring it up here, is, you know, my idea is so obvious that I don't have to include a go-to-market strategy. It's so obvious it's going to be successful. Or I don't have to include financials. I don't need management. But those are myths. And remember that a business plan or investor deck or pitch deck, whatever you want to call it, is just a way for you to tell this story of your company. So have a good story to tell and tell a good story. Let me share with you a sample deck that I think it's a good deck. So you have an idea, and I hope that you still have a few more minutes for me. So this is a real company. It's an AeroSense. So the first slide, the initial slide, you can see from the get-go that it's an industry in the aviation sector. You know that because they have a depiction of an airplane. And what makes me interested in this company is that from the get-go, I'm also seeing major brands in the industry that they somehow have an association with, and encourages me to go to the next slide. I'm just selected some slides that I want to just focus on rather than the whole deck. But here again, and I'll talk about the management team. Again, very strong team. Every member of the team comes from the industry, knowledgeable, experience with deep industry expertise, strong education. They identify a major problem in the industry, and they have a solution for that problem. Unless you come from that industry, you may not be aware, but the safety equipment in the airplanes, and I'm talking about life vests and oxygen and that kind of equipment. It's required by the FAA that it gets an inventory every flight prior to departure. And right now it has to be done manually. So there's someone that goes and checks every seat to make sure that the equipment is there. And they have to check to see if the other safety equipment is on board. And it's a time consuming and expensive. The other thing that I did not know before I started working with this company is that in some countries and some flights, people walk away with their life vests. So, and life vests can get expensive. So they've developed a solution for that industry. And they tag every life vest and every safety equipment, and it gets inventory automatically on a smartphone prior to the flight. And by the way, a lot of you thinking, well, that technology is not that complicated, but it is, because RFID, which would be the first thought that all of us might have, doesn't work in the airplane because there's so many metal components. So their solution is Bluetooth based. And the other thing that a lot of people don't know, I'm talking about barriers to entry, anything that you use on an airplane requires a FAA certification, which is a process can take anywhere from 6 months to a year, and it's hugely expensive. Just to get a certification for anything, it costs in the range of $300,000 to $500,000. So those are major barrier of entries to any competitor trying to enter that market. Plus, their solution is patented, so it makes it very attractive to the investor. The other thing is that it's a very large market. There's over 30,000 aircraft in the market that are flying on a daily basis. Like I said before, they have cloud-based Bluetooth solution that is patented and actually has been identified by the Department of Defense also as a critical component and that they want to do further research on. They have very early traction, a lot of interest from the airlines. They're right now in certification process, still waiting for their final certification from the FAA. But just based on the strength of the product, they've already developed a worldwide distribution relationship with HEICO, which is a public company that sells parts to most of the airlines in the world. They have developed strong, clear financial projections. They have a clear funding need. They don't need that much money because fortunately, HEICO is footing a lot of the bills. And that's it for Aeroson's. Just some final thoughts. Like I said before, tell a really, really compelling story with your business plan. It's really the opportunity to share a great story. And as I said before, don't overlook the strength of a management team. If you have a strong management team, it doesn't matter what product you're thinking of putting out, that, chances are you'll get some funding. I talked about the financial projections. It's important to have those financial projections, take the time to develop, because if they don't talk to you, they're not going to talk to me. And just remember that, as an investor, I know that everyone has a plan, and until, things happen, you don't know. They can fail for the most incredible reasons that you can imagine. There's no fail safe investment. So ideas are easy, implementation is hard. That's what I've been saying all along. Again, my name is Ricardo, and this is my email address if you are interested in writing to me. Thank you, and I'm opening for questions.
Yeah, sure. And thank you, Ricardo. And just to give everyone a heads up, Ricardo is part of the Florida SBDC team. We have 24 business consultants at your disposal at no cost to you. We have consultants working from Miami-Dade all the way down to Monroe County at no cost to you once again. As such, access to capital, business planning, international trade, government contracting. And I provided you the link so you could go and register. You could contact Ricardo, and also you could contact myself and Brianna, as we'll be more than happy to assist you with the next steps. Also, if you're located outside the region of Miami-Dade and Monroe County, I will be able to connect you virtually with my counterpart in the respected region to assist you with your business needs as well. Ricardo, I have two questions for you. One of them is there an example of the type of financials that should be shared and differences between the pitch and investor financials?
So I share with you a slide that is a summary financials that should be used either in the investor or on the pitch deck. It's the same. There's no differentiation here. What I said before is that you should have prepared, and I don't want to use the word Excel, or because nowadays you have options to alternatives to Excel. You can do a Google worksheet as well, but you should take the time to work on a detailed financial projections. There are many different alternatives that you can develop. There's no format or specific plan that you need to follow in that regard. And if you contact our office, we can share a couple alternatives with you. But the important thing is that you should have a breakout tab for the salary and benefits, because for me as an investor, I want to know when you're planning to bring people on board and how much you're thinking of paying them. And the other breakout tab should be marketing and sales, because I really want to know how you're going to be supporting your product launch and how much it's going to cost. And the final breakout tab is a detailed tab on your general and administrative expenses. On the revenue side, if you have different revenue streams, you should be able to detail those in also a breakout tab, whether it's streams that are coming in a geographical way, or they're coming in from different products that you may be thinking. One common error that I see happening in a lot of financial projections is that people straight line expenses and revenue. So what they say is, or what I see happening, at least in the financial projections, is, well, they think of rent. Just to give you an example, rent is going to cost me $5,000, and they put rent from month 1 through month 12 as $5,000. I know that you're not going to go out and rent space before you get funding, first of all. And second of all, you're probably okay working at your home until this COVID situation gets resolved on one hand, and on the other hand, until you have a bigger team in place. So you're probably not going to need that $5,000 for rent till only your 11th or 12th month of operations. So if you straight line rent, it's going to show us a $60,000 expense in your financial projections. If you put some thought into it and only need it for a couple months in the first year, it's only going to be a $10,000 expense. The difference is $50,000 in the top, in your expectation of money raised. Me as an investor, when you do that way, I see that you put some serious thought into this, and that you're looking at it in a professional manner. If I see a straight line expense, I just see these guys being lazy and not willing to take the time to think things through on every single line item. The same with the salary and benefits. If you think that you're going to need 4 engineers, and you estimate the cost of those 4 engineers and you straight line them, apart from that higher cost, then it's really a representation of a reality. I know that hiring 4 engineers, unless you have them ready to go in the drawer, it's going to be difficult. It's going to take you 2 or 3 months before you can onboard them completely and they start working for you. And most probably, they're not going to happen on the first day. It's going to be a staggered growth in terms of personnel. So that's why the financial projections have to tell a story. So it's not about the format of the financial projections, but it's about the thought that you put into the financial projections.
And in your opinion, can you receive funding from investors for software SaaS, even if the project is built by one of the 5 major cloud services, but it is your idea and you have a outside to help execute future plans to scale the business?
So it's a broad question, so I'm not sure I'm going to give you a precise answer, but typically investors are looking for innovation. That doesn't mean that you have to develop the software from the ground up, and it could be software that was already developed and you're using as a platform for anything that you do. For example, just to give you an example, you may be utilizing Oracle as your database for a product or service that you're providing, and you're using their e-commerce engine. But the concept and the idea have to be innovative in its application. If you're just going to be redistributing products and services from other companies, then you need to identify that, and it's probably not going to be in the interest of the typical early stage technology startup, but there might be investors that are looking for that type of investment.
All right, perfect. And also, last but not least, I got it actually an email. Are there some good websites or podcasts or YouTube videos that one could see for additional pitch decks formats?
Well, if Actually, I mean, if you Google it, there's hundreds of thousands of possibilities in terms of information that you can download or look at or watch via YouTube or a tape webinar. So there's a lot of information out there. But the just a general comment, my feeling is that you learn more by doing than by reading about it. And unfortunately, when I mentor companies, part of the issue is that there's 100 different people giving 100 different opinions. And until you've been there and done that, it's really just an opinion. So, go for it. I mean, start building it up and use the template that I've shared with you today. It's a good template. It covers everything that you need to know. So
Perfect. And like I said, if there's any other additional questions, concerns, don't hesitate. Shoot myself an email, Brianna or Ricardo. As we're more than happy to assist you. Also, you could go ahead and I just sent the email out. If you're interested to meet with our other business consultants, once again, it's no cost to you. We'll be more than happy to assist you in your business venture. But without any other additional questions, I just want to thank you. Have a wonderful day, and looking forward to seeing you at our next webinar. All right, take care.
good luck.
All right.